This is not a new subject. It's a subject that if my students would ever accuse me of nagging, this would be the one. It's about practicing Dharma according to the spirit of the law, according to the essence of the law, and holding that as most precious, and having that be possibly not even related to many of us. It's not even related to how we express ourselves externally. Now, in the best case scenario, if we were to see a monk or a nun or a Dharma practitioner who had some of the gear, you know, whatever it is, gear. When we see practitioners like that who have so given themselves over to practicing the Dharma that they are wearing the robes, or they have taken vows, whether they be lay vows or whether they be the vows of the ordained monks and nuns, to be that closely involved in practicing Dharma, you would hope that the best case scenario was happening. And that would mean that the outer garments, the outer tools, the outer habits, Dharma habits, are nothing else than an expression of something that is actually occurring internally on a very subtle, a very secret level. We would hope then that these external signs that we see, such as the taking of vows and wearing robes, would indicate a process that is happening inside, not the other way around. And that can happen. And since many of us actually are about to either renew vows or to take new vows, this is a good time to talk about that and to be really honest. First of all, in terms of becoming a monk or a nun, fully ordained in that way, there is no more profound a statement or an example that one can create out of their lives than to give their lives over completely to spiritual renunciation. To do so to such an extent that one's whole life becomes a display of that. One's whole life is upholding the Buddha Dharma. One's whole life is practicing according to the Buddha's teachings. One's whole life is developing the kind of ethical and moral backbone that is recommended by the Buddha. There really isn't anything better than that. There isn't any quicker method or quicker path than to take these vows and to live accordingly, and to understand that the vows are a means to an end and not an end in themselves. Unfortunately, that is the main mistake that we make when we take the first vows that make us Buddhist and the subsequent vows that make us lay practitioners, and then beyond that, if we go into the actual ordination of monk and nun. The mistake we make is that when we have done that, that's it. We've done that. And even this is true of our monks and nuns here. I'm sure they will admit to this if you corner them. When they first took on their robes, they kind of, in an innocent way, expected that everything is different now. Suddenly we have no desire. Suddenly we have no materialism. Suddenly we're nice. This never happened before. But suddenly we're nice. And suddenly, all of our moral and ethical values that we really treasure the most have come to the forefront, and magically everything else has disappeared. Don't you wish? Don't you wish? Well, they wished that very hard. Unfortunately, it didn't happen. And what they found out, I'm sure they'll tell you, is that taking the robes is a method. Taking these vows, taking these ordinations, these step-by-step ordinations at whatever level you choose, these are methods. They are a means to an end. They should, in best case scenario, give us the opportunity to be constantly reminded. What's it like? Let's see, what's a good analogy? Oh, golly, 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 I can't think of anything right now. But let's think about how, what do the robes do? Well, the robes have twofold purpose. One of the purposes is that they actually afford a blessing to all beings. Just to see the robes, even just to do that, is a tremendous blessing. Tremendous blessing that will lead ultimately to some excellent result in the future for the one who sees the robes, let alone the one who shows them. But there is another, I have to say, more subtle or maybe more secret benefit of the robes that you wouldn't think about. You wouldn't think about until you actually put them on and notice that it's true. The robes are, for those that wear them, a kind of safety net. They are a reminder. When we look at ourselves, if we do see ourselves in a reflection, we see a religious life. The monks and nuns, they all pretty much wear their hair the same way, those that have it. And they pretty much wear their hair the same way, so there's not even all that much difference between the way the monks wear their hair and the nuns wear their hair. They all pretty much wear their robes in the same way, some a little sloppier than others, but you know, it's pretty much all the same. So that when you look at your reflection or when you think about how it is that you live your life, there is less of that ego clinging that causes us to get wrapped up in the kind of neuroses that we get wrapped up in when it's very, very important to be an individual. You know, that kind of idea where you're really clinging to your ego and clinging to all the rigid places in it. We don't identify with ourselves quite as strongly that way anymore. When we begin to wear the robes, we see ourselves as an office, in a sense, officiating to, you know, for sentient beings. We see ourselves as a display of the spiritual life. We see ourselves as wearing the Buddha's clothing, literally wearing the Buddha's clothing. And so maybe at first it's just this much, but gradually, over a period of time, we become acclimated to that, and the robes then for us are kind of a protector. They are a protector. They remind us why we're here. It's one of the terrible problems of our society. We've gotten so materialistic and so busy and so, you know, involved in everything in the 10 directions that we just kind of lose sight. We lose count of what we are and who we are. And in this modern world, it's a very common question. What am I doing here? What's it all about? These are the questions that run around in our minds constantly, especially at certain critical times in our life. Well, the robes and the vows provide us with an answer that is suitable for someone who wishes to attain realization, who wishes to leave cyclic existence, the realm of death and rebirth. These robes then become to us like, even if we wear them, they become to us like objects of refuge. It seems odd, but for those of you who don't know about this, when monks and nuns have their robes, particularly their yellow robes, which are the robes of fully ordained monks and nuns, they actually fold them up very carefully and put them on their altar, and they prostrate to them. Because these are the Buddha's robes, and these are robes that keep us in that pure inner posture of accomplishing Dharma. They remind us constantly. So that's the best case scenario. That's what you hope is happening, that gradually over time, after having taken the commitment and made the commitment of wearing the robes, that it would take a while, but we would grow into them. You know, they don't solve the problem of samsara immediately upon putting them on. If they were, we could have a Dharma retail store. You know, there wouldn't be any problems. But it's not like that, not at all. These robes become for us a path, a method, as well as any level of ordination that we take. For those of us that have taken, let's say, renunciate vows for lay practitioners or Genyen vows, there may not be any visible external robes, but those vows in themselves, just remembering them and concentrating on them and remaining absorbed in them, we can see that we have made a certain kind of choice, and it becomes to us like a guide. It becomes to us like a reference point, I guess, more than anything else. We can always refer back to the robes. We can always refer back to our vows for guidance. Now, when we take vows and take robes, we have to constantly remind ourselves as to why we do this. Because if we haven't a real understanding of the reason, there won't be much value. It will be very much like a little kid dressing up in daddy's clothing, or a little girl dressing up in mommy's clothing. It's just a costume. So there is a certain process that each one of us must go through in order to move more deeply and more profoundly into the Buddhist teachings. There are certain fundamental thoughts that we have to trace. If we haven't got these thoughts and we're about to take vows or robes, this is not a good thing. We need to backtrack, pull back, and work through this sequence again. And it's something that we should think about from now until we achieve supreme enlightenment. And that is that we have to understand, first of all, what the Buddha has taught us about samsara. We have learned that all sentient beings are suffering, that suffering exists in all areas of samsara, that even when suffering is not visible, that it still exists. For instance, I see many of you here, many of you in this room that look youthful and attractive and very healthy, and you look like you're in pretty good shape. So for us, when we are in that kind of condition, samsara becomes a little bit invisible at times. You know? We don't look at ourselves and say, gee, this isn't the face I had 10 years ago. I think I must be dying. You know? But from the Buddhist teaching, there's something to that. You're 10 years closer to the big day than you were before. And the Buddha also teaches us that one of the faults of cyclic existence, additionally, is that we don't know when the big day will come. So we are taught that there is a certain kind of delusion factor or narcotic quality to samsara, to cyclic existence. And that being the case, we sort of stand back and we look at cyclic existence as something not to take refuge in. Not to feel cyclic existence will not save us. We look at that and we think, one thing I know for sure is that we're all going to experience old age, sickness, and death. That's nothing to take refuge in. And so we begin to look around to understand more deeply the Buddha's teachings. And the Buddha says that we are suffering from desire. So now we are looking for a way to eliminate or pacify that desire. And of course we go through all the baby steps of just simply suppressing everything, which really doesn't work all that well. It just makes you a little wacko. Then one fine day we wake up and actually begin to use the path. We actually begin to use the Buddhist teaching. We begin to practice the methodology. We begin to absorb the logic and the philosophy. And slowly, slowly, we begin to move towards realization. The mind begins to clarify, it begins to deepen, and we move toward liberation. The Buddha also teaches us about cause and effect. The Buddha says to us something that we never quite got before. Because of the way we were raised, we were in a position where if we were bad and we got caught, we were in trouble. If we were good and that got noticed, we got some approval. However, if we were bad and we didn't get caught, we got away with it. And this is the idea that we have. So we really have very little familiarity with what the Buddha has taught, which is that cause and effect relationships are not only exacting, but they arise interdependently. That it's actually true that when you give rise to the cause, you have also given rise to the result. right there, right happening, right at that moment. We really can't see that because we have a certain way of perceiving time. And time to us is a mystery. We don't understand time. We think time's over here, space is over there, and mind is somewhere else. We don't understand that time, space, and mind are actually exactly the same fabric. So we perceive time in a linear fashion. So we can't see, first of all, we can't see that perhaps in our last previous life, we committed some kind of non-virtue that is really plaguing us in this life, the result of which is really plaguing us in this life. Let's say, I don't know, in our past life, maybe we were not kind and generous to people less fortunate than us. In fact, we were quite selfish. In this lifetime, no matter what we do, we cannot seem to rub two nickels together. We just can't ever seem to pay the rent and the electric bill at the same time. It's just that kind of thing. So we wouldn't know why that was happening, and the tendency would be to think, poor me. Everybody else seems to be able to make some money, but I'm unfortunate. It just never seems to work out for me. Now, of course, with that kind of ordinary thinking, very little progress can be made. Isn't it true? If you have no idea what went wrong, you can't fix it. And the beauty of the Buddha's teaching is that it presents this cause and effect relationship in a logical way if we have the courage to actually absorb it, to take it in, and to live by it. Now that's the hard part. That is the hard part, because we've been trained in such a way that, again, as long as we get away with something, we're okay. And we've gotten trained so well with that often we lie to ourselves. As long as we can convince ourselves, how neurotic is this? As long as we can convince ourselves we didn't do it, we're home and dry. That little denial thing that we do. But here the Buddha gives us this amazing jewel, this amazing wealth that says cause and effect arise interdependently, and you are responsible, and you are capable. Not only is the ball in your court, but the jewel is in your hand. So when we approach the Buddha's teachings, if we do it well, if we take the vows and wear the robes with the understanding that we are creating pure and virtuous causes that will be of enormous benefit in the future. Enormous benefit. For instance, if we are to practice a virtuous and generous life at this time, not only will there be benefit to sentient beings, but for ourselves in the future, there will be much less neuroses, much less suffering. And in fact, we are then creating the very causes for happiness. Happiness, you know that elusive drug that you can't seem to buy? Happiness. But we will be creating the causes for happiness. How amazing. It takes a long time to learn that. And one of the reasons for taking these vows that structure our spiritual growth, one of the reasons for taking on these robes that house our spiritual intention, is to remind us, to help us, to lead us along in a way where we can really approach self-honesty and create the causes for freedom. So all these teachings that the Buddha has given us, these are things that we have to go over in order to understand why it is that we're even sitting in this room. I mean, even if we've taken really no vows, like maybe refuge or something like that, or those of us that have taken no vows, we're sitting in this room and there's a reason for it. I mean, surely you didn't come here for entertainment. Because if you did, you need to get a life. I've been told that I'm a good comedian, but there's better. So I think that, each of us here, we have something in common. We're looking to approach the spiritual life. We're looking to grab onto it. And these teachings that the Buddha has given us, these thoughts that we must follow about the condition of cyclic existence, about cause and effect relationships, and about moving into an ethical and responsible life and what that will produce, these are exquisitely important. So that when we take robes, when we take vows, there should only be really one reason for taking them. And that is to accomplish the twofold purpose of self and other. That sounds like a mouthful, doesn't it? Well, what that means is that, again, having examined the Buddha's foundational teachings, we have found and determined, as the Buddha has determined, that cyclic existence is faulted, that it is flawed. And having discovered that, we discover that we wish to end cyclic existence because cyclic existence is filled with suffering. We see all sentient beings of all kinds suffering terribly, not even knowing why they're suffering, just spinning, spinning, spinning in a world where suffering is the law, is the thing that happens. And then we look at ourselves and we notice that we too are suffering. We suffer from the things that human beings suffer from: old age, sickness, and death, the suffering of suffering. All of the typical sufferings, these are all part of what we experience. And from the point of view of compassion, from the point of view of concern for the welfare of sentient beings, we look at this, that all beings are suffering, ourselves not accepted, also included in that, and we think, enough is enough. Enough is enough. If I have a choice, I'm going to take a choice. I'm going to do something about that. I want to accomplish the purpose of self and other, that is liberation and freedom from suffering for oneself and for all sentient beings. If you're taking robes because you want to dress up, if you are taking vows because it's cool, so that you can walk around and say, I'm a renunciate, or I'm a nakba. If you're doing that, I would recommend you go into, I don't know, acting. Maybe a little stage work. Because really what's happening there is you're in a play and you have a costume. I would prefer not to see that, because it will do you no good. It will not accumulate any happiness for you. It will not accumulate any virtue. And it probably will cause problems because the motivation isn't correct. So my hope for you is that all of this nagging and hammering that I've done for what, 12 years, 13 years, 14 years, I don't know how long. How long have I been nagging you guys? Huh? 14 years I've been nagging these people. And they're still here. Isn't that weird? It's true that there are many times that my teaching has taken the form of nagging. But I would hope that after all of that, after having heard all of that for so many years, that you would come to understand that you have to really check for yourself, reason out for yourself, and internalize the Buddha's basic, fundamental philosophical thoughts about the condition of samsara and the needs of sentient beings to be free of suffering. That needs to be part of you, in your heart. Now that doesn't happen on an emotional level. It doesn't happen just lucky. You know, one day I woke up and suddenly I got it. That's another religion, guys. That's not what's happening here. That kind of understanding, that kind of depth, that kind of responsibility to one's own path, to produce the causes of happiness rather than the causes of suffering. That understanding what we're up against and making choices based on the needs of oneself and sentient beings. That kind of thing comes through really internalizing, really baptizing oneself and really following through on the Buddhist teachings, really getting it, thinking about it again and again and again, reasoning it out for oneself. I know many of you have had the experience where someone in authority said, "This is how it is." And you can repeat to someone else, "This is how it is." But until you run smashing into the wall that teaches you that is how it is, you haven't really learned it yet. Or until you take that bit of advice from someone that you respect as a senior person, such as the Buddha, who has been through the ocean of suffering and has reached the other shore. So you look at the Buddhist, you look at the Buddha and you say, well, you know, the Buddha has achieved realization, therefore he knows. Therefore this is true. And then having assumed that, which would be an intelligent thing to assume, I would think, you know, having assumed that, we reason it all out, we think it through, we weigh it carefully. Does it seem reasonable that cause and effect are related? Does to me. I mean, you know, it's pretty clear, in fact. I've seen it, haven't you, in your everyday life, that you know, the seeds that you sow, what you produce, you will reap. So you've seen small examples of that. And it seems reasonable and logical that these examples should extend to all of our experience as sentient beings. That it should really be some kind of like backbone of truth, that this is really happening to us. We wish that it were not so, in a way, because we think about all of the non-virtuous habits, all the non-virtuous acts that we have accumulated while we were in a state of unknowing, while we were in a state of not understanding about the connection between cause and effect relationships. I mean, you know, thinking that there are no cause and effect relationships and the whole deal is about whether you're right, under those conditions it would be okay to hate and to be prejudiced and to be just ornery in a general way. You would think that that would be okay. But doggone it, we find out that cause and effect relationships are connected, and we're not going to get away with it. We wish we could, but we will never get away with it. We will only produce more suffering and more unhappiness. So we have to look at it in that kind of a familiar way. It's not enough just to read the teachings and go, this is a grocery list. Here are the 10 glorious something or others, and the 84 mediocre other things, and the 79, you know, not so good, blah, blah, blah. That's nothing. If that's what you're going to do, if you're just going to read those words and memorize them and throw them back at somebody else, something's not happening. Something's not happening. One needs to realize them in a deep, personal way. And that's the great benefit of taking vows and wearing robes. It becomes very personal. The path is very personal. It becomes a personal guide to live by. You relate it to your personal life. You know that if you do not give rise to the bodhicitta, to the great compassion, you know that if you allow your mind to be filled with thoughts of prejudice and hatred and lack of caring, lack of love, you know that you have gone outside the definition of what the path is, and the result will not be good. And you can remember that, because that's the way the path is set up. That's the great value of taking vows and wearing robes. You should really only take vows and wear robes if you're looking forward to doing the work that's associated with that. For instance, if you become a monk or a nun, to look forward to the pure conduct that will bless and ripen your mind stream. This is powerful. This is a beautiful thing. To look forward to the robes because you like to dress up, wait till you put those boogers on. They are not as easy as they look. So that's not the big hit here. What we look forward to is the opportunity to live that life. in order to produce excellent results. And again, the bottom line concern is the twofold needs of self and others. You know, the twofold need. These are the reasons. Now, in the worst case scenario, we have people that, and you know, this is human. This is not bad. This is what happens. I don't know. Maybe we felt that we weren't accepted growing up. Maybe we felt that maybe we feel nobody loves us. Who knows? Maybe Mama dropped us on our head and we're a little touched. But it could be, you know, there can be lots of different reasons why we would look to be involved in a group thing to make us feel included, to make us feel connected. And often in that kind of situation, Dharma practitioners will collect empowerments from high lamas, like Mrs. Marcos collected shoes. Really. A whole closet full of them. And I've had people, you laugh, but I've had people come up to me and ask me, what empowerments have you received? And I go, I don't know, I got them written down somewhere. I mean, you know, I'm just... And I've had old-time practitioners just go, you can see the head go up and the eyes go down and the nostrils, you know. They'll say, well, I've had this from this Lama and that from Lama. Things I can't even pronounce. Don't care if I ever pronounce, actually. But they have all these lists. But look at the posture. Look what is the result when all you can do with that is say, my ego is really terrific. You know, do something fun then. Really, if I were going to waste my time in a situation, I don't think I'd be a Buddhist. There's so many more fun things you could do out there. So, my advice to you is not to engage in the Buddha Dharma for such silly and ridiculous reasons. Sure, some of us are strange, and we feel like, some more than others, that's right. And we feel like it's a good thing to be, it's really cool to be in an ethnic minority. Well, we didn't make it, we didn't come back black, we didn't come back Asian in this country, we didn't come back, I don't know, what, Indian, anything like that, so let's be Buddhist. And hey, you know, if you're Buddhist, woman, and black, hey! That's really something. Especially if you used to be Jewish. You could be in the front of anybody's line, honey. But I'm making jokes about it, but some of us actually, when we engage in the Buddha Dharma, have thoughts like that. We think of ourselves as very unique and individual people, and so we want to express that. We'll go for a weird religion. As far away from Presbyterian as you can. Because that's like way too normal. So we have all these silly and ridiculous, and it sounds silly and ridiculous, but believe me, I've seen it. I've seen it. The idea of doing something like this because it's cool, or for all the wrong reasons. To feel part of something. To feel vindicated because you were always a little different. There are all kinds of strange and odd reasons why people will take up something like this, which in our culture, which in the Western American culture, is not usual. We are in the minority. My hope is that none of you is stuck in that worst case scenario. That none of you is so intent on accumulating self-aggrandizement and non-virtue that you would engage in something as precious as the Buddhist path for these wrong reasons. Because eventually, first of all, you won't stay that way. You won't be able to. When the coolness wears off, when the newness wears off, and when you figure out that these robes are somewhat less than comfortable sometimes, there just won't be anything to anchor you and fortify you into this virtuous life. Far better, isn't it, to have very little external sign, to have very little display. If you're afraid your ego is going to get out of control, to have very little display, but very, very carefully, very, very meticulously carry the Buddhist teachings inside of you. Carry these virtuous thoughts, these thoughts of compassion inside of you. Really, to be the best Buddhist on the face of this earth, no one has to know. No one has to know. They may take note of your behavior and see that it's different. They may notice you don't step on bugs. They may notice you don't swat flies. They may not understand it, but you do. And so here's what's important, really. No matter what you look like or what your display or your image looks like, whether you, I don't know, look like what you think saintly ought to look like, which, I don't know, what is that? Eyes rolled ever skyward. You don't get to wear any makeup, which I guess that puts me out right there. So, you know, instead of trying to look saintly, rather than that, to put one's energy on the internal path, the subtlety of really expressing and knowing one's pure intention. Really having that pure intention and thinking of it as like a jewel that you hold in your heart. And then beyond, you know, and really holding that precious life as something that cannot be exchanged for anything else. That in your mind you can say, well, yeah, I could go and do this, and this would be lots and lots of fun, and maybe I could have a real good time doing that. But when you weigh it against the preciousness of your intention and your vows, you think, I can't exchange this for this. They're simply not of equal value. This is ephemeral, it disappears, it's nothing. But this life, these vows, these intentions, these are mine. These are precious, these are weighty. My commitment to love all sentient beings equally and to work for their welfare. My commitment to express my life in such a way as to bring benefit to others. That's the thing, and it's not exchangeable. It's not worth anything else that we can experience, you see? To hold that kind of strength within you, that's precious and valuable. And if beyond that, because of the force of your commitment, because of the strength of your connection, that you are able to say, additionally, I wish this to be, and it is for me so much the case, that I want to see my life as the life of a renunciate. I want to constantly be aware of the choices that I have made. I want to use my life as a path. This is my choice. I wish to display my life, to use my life as a path. Then at that time, we should go more deeply into the taking of vows. At that time, we should wear the robes. Of course, we also have the same option of practicing in that way as lay people. It's very individualized, and that's one of the beautiful things about the Buddha's path. There's a place for everybody. There is the simple practitioner who simply has faith and who really cares about sentient beings and wants to increase in their caring. And maybe all they say is, all they do is walk around, Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum, with a simple kind of faith, knowing that if somebody's suffering, they can say some Om Mani Padme Hum for them, and some prayers for them, and maybe they can help a little bit. Or knowing that if they have some kind of difficulty, they can rely on the blessing of their practice, and they can say Om Mani Padme Hum, and that would be a really good thing. That kind of simple faith, that's one level of practitioner, and it's not a lesser level. There are, in fact, many uncountable stories about practitioners in Tibet who attained the rainbow body, and all anyone ever saw them do is to just say a little Om Mani Padme Hum. That's all. They were never seen to really be practiced in how to accomplish puja. They never really had any teachings. They never really, did all the traditional retreats or anything like that. Some of them, the simpler people in Tibet, couldn't even read. So they had no access, less than you, to the texts. But that simple level of practice was for them a jewel that they held within them, like it was the jewel of their life. And then, of course, there are practitioners who are householders, who wish to remain in a family situation, who have responsibilities and duties to their family, or for whatever reason are more inclined to be connected with the world in such a way as to practice as lay people. There are many, many uncountable cases of lay people who practice like that, who were able to achieve the rainbow body, or were able to achieve supreme realization. There are many recognized tulkus who, when you look at their history, they were very rarely, if at all, well, very rarely I would have to say, ordained as monks and nuns. Their history has been to express themselves as lay people. And of course that would be appropriate wherever they appear for the people that they are teaching. And then there's another level, the level that, one could take robes, one could take vows that allow to wear robes, either as a Genyen or as a Gelong or Getzel level of ordination. And in that case, the outer form, and here's the challenge, the outer form and the inner intention have to match. We have to be sure that one is not happening to the exclusion of the other. We have to be sure that we know why we are doing this. And we have to constantly check ourselves every day. This is important. At whatever level we are practicing, to constantly check ourselves every day. Every one of us, myself included. As a practitioner, you are remiss if you don't do that. To constantly check ourselves every day and make sure that we are really being true to ourselves and making the best opportunity that we can. Now, the reason why I say we should constantly check ourselves is because I have seen practitioners who have been practicing for some time and who have had extensive teachings. Maybe they might be asked to, maybe they're knowledgeable enough to where they might be asked to teach the Four Noble Truths to a group of people. Or maybe they might be asked to lead a meditation or something like that, lead a practice. And maybe the practitioner might say, well, I know I'm wearing these robes and everything, but I don't really like to do that. Whoa, that's a real danger signal. Back up and ask yourself why you're wearing the robes. Because it really isn't about what you like to do. Is anyone in this room doing what they like to do right now? I would like to be back in bed. No, we have a different goal. We have something else that's going on here that we're reaching for. And so we have to ask ourselves instead, what's needed? What's needed? You must consider yourself then a representative of the Buddha Dharma in the world. And so now you must be of help. Not just doing your own thing, what you like to do, but truly of benefit to sentient beings. And if you're not into that, if you can't quite connect the dots here, then you need to go back to the beginning and ask yourself, why have you taken these vows? What are the thoughts and understandings and recognitions that you had to bring you to that point? Why are you wearing these robes? Why are you engaging in this life? If not for the sake of oneself and all sentient beings, then what's the point? So I'm bringing this up on the, I guess you'd say, almost the eve of His Holiness's coming, where he will be ordaining at several different levels new students. How amazing that here in this land where Dharma is not native, that so many of us have found our way into living such an extraordinary spiritual life. That so many of us have the fortunate karma, the extraordinary merit to be able to meet with such a profound spiritual life. How amazing. But in order to make that really worth something, we have to practice it deeply every single day. It has to be so much a part of us. These thoughts have to be constantly cultivated. They don't appear naturally in our minds. Do you know that? They simply don't appear naturally in our minds. And do you know why? Because of habitual tendency. If you're waiting for the idea of renunciation to come to you, you're going to be waiting for a long time. If you're waiting for the dust to clear, if you're waiting for the inspiration to live a virtuous life, if you're waiting for the feeling to hit you, then your path is waiting, not Buddhism. That's the truth. If you are simply hoping that eventually, if you hang out with all of this enough, something will pop, or you'll have an aha someday or something like that, then you're not hearing me. This precious intention, this understanding of cause and effect relationships, this understanding of the faults of cyclic existence, these thoughts have to be cultivated. And if they're not cultivated continuously, even if you've cultivated them for 5 years, then you stop. You'll lose your way. The reason why is that habitually, since time out of mind, the only consideration that we have had in our little pea brains is, I am, therefore I am, therefore you are too. We have clung, since time out of mind, we have had the idea of self-nature being inherently real, and it's such a solid thing for us. Even as we begin to take our baby steps in the Buddha Dharma, we go, I have my mala, I am wearing these clothes, I am doing this. And we perceive it all through this window of egocentricity. And it's because that's our habit. We only really know how to recognize a separation between self and other, and that's unfortunate. It's unfortunate because then we have all these crazy ideas like, I think I should get what I want from you. What are you going to give me anyway? So we have that idea. Whereas if we really understood the Buddha's teachings, we would understand that there is a fundamental, undefined, free of division, free of conceptualization, primordial ground of being, which is our nature. And that nature is not separate. To look at, it's free of any contrivance, in fact, any kind of conceptualization. To look at any other human being with these eyes of duality and see that one is out there, separate from you, not the same as you, is a delusion. It is a delusion that we all gradually, through practicing these more virtuous philosophies and ideas, these teachings that the Buddha has offered us, gradually over time we will move away from that kind of delusion and move into a deeper understanding of our nature, the primordial ground of being. And at that point awaken as the Buddha. So slowly, slowly, over time, slowly, slowly, and it's not going to happen overnight. It's a gradual, profound process that is enabled by the taking of vows, that is enabled by the wearing of robes. But most of all, first and foremost, it is enabled by our inner practice, pure intention, again and again internalizing the philosophy, connecting the dots, self-honesty, realizing these cause and effect relationships and not letting yourself hide them from yourself, but really practicing in a true and honest way. This is the thing that will make a difference, not what you wear, not words that you say if you're just mouthing them. But instead, I hope that you will think of yourself in the way that I think of you, which is that when I look at each and every one of you, I see the potential for Buddhahood. I see that by virtue of the fact that you have walked through this door and have met with the path of Dharma, have met with the Buddha's teachings, by virtue of the fact that you can see these images, the statues, the pictures, the texts, these that we consider expressions of the Buddha's path, by virtue that you are here, by virtue of the fact that you are here, something enormous and amazing is happening. The virtue that you have accumulated previously, the hard work, the pure intention that you may have had in the past, has suddenly come to fruition, has suddenly ripened. And here you are with this potential for Buddhahood, looking at the path, picking up your feet and your heart and walking. This is a miracle. This is a miracle. In one way, they say the meanest worm, the lowliest cockroach, has the potential for Buddhahood, and that's true, but you are here. It takes more than the potential, it also takes the conditions to be ripe. This is a miracle. You are here, and these conditions have ripened. Now you have to do everything you can to guard that. And the best thing that you can do to guard that opportunity and to guard this miraculous event is to keep alive that constant stream of pure intention. To really study the Buddha's teaching in such a way that you understand the cause and effect relationships that lead to the desired result. To not get lost in just playing some kind of empty, stupid game. But for the first time, and I say this especially to those of you that are about to take the robes, to look at your life as not something that's a result of what your parents did to you, not something confusing and weird and mixed up and crazy, but to look at your life as something so precious, so beyond the measurement of wealth. I mean, so beyond anything you could ever measure. And then as we move together into wearing the robes, taking these vows at whatever level we can, whatever level we want to, at whatever level we're practicing, to take such a pure, personal, internal, responsible hold of our spiritual path, to develop it, to nurture it, to milk it for all the blessings that it can give you. This is the thing to do. This is really the thing to do. So I hope for you, any of you that are about to take robes or about to take vows, even just the Bodhisattva and Refuge vows for the first time, and those of you that took them the other night for the first time, to each one of you I say, Mazel Tov. Oh, sorry, wrong religion. But more than that, this is the first pure, virtuous, and holy thing that we have ever actually really done. When we transform and offer our lives as a vehicle to end the suffering of all sentient beings, as a vehicle by which oneself and all others will awaken and attain liberation. This is the first pure and gorgeous thing that we have ever done. The feeling that I have had when I watched my first group of monks and nuns take their vows, I was a mess that day. Too bad I hadn't thought about waterproof mascara. I was really a mess. I was crying and crying, and because I looked at them and I thought, look at this, my friends, my dear friends that I know so well, not only from this life, but from all other lives. Their opportunities have accumulated. They have come to the point where they have made this decision. Nothing they have ever done in their lives, even if it's American and apple pie and mother, nothing they've ever done in their lives has ever been that pure. This is beautiful. And so I find this kind of activity, this intention, this going more and more deeply into the path, this empowering one's life to be beautiful and rare. And for those of you that are moving in that direction, and I see that so many of you are, thank you. Thank you. It is because of you that someday samsara will be emptied. It is because of you that someday there will be an end to suffering. All the connections that you have with the sentient beings that you don't even know in this lifetime, but are connected with, they will eventually ripen, and all of them will benefit by your gift. All of them. How wonderful. How extraordinary. So in closing, if you read the paper and you say, yuck, what's happening to the world? Or you read the paper and you think, this is really bad, this is a mess, I invite you to do something about it. I invite you to contribute that kind of heartfelt virtue to the soup that we have here. And eventually, we'll have something worth feasting on. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but we'd be laying the seeds for it now. And I want to say also that I'm very proud of you. The idea, it was me that started all the trouble. It was me that, I know I did that. It was me that had this bright idea that we were going to have a 24-hour-a-day prayer vigil. So, hey, I'm the idea person. But you guys carried it out. And you are carrying it out. And that's the point, isn't it? That's the point. I'm really proud of you. I'm really proud of you. I hope that you, for the first time, are able to look at your lives, no matter what your parents told you, no matter what society told you, no matter how things worked out. I don't care what your life was like. I hope that now, for the first time, you can look at your life and say, this is precious. I am precious. No less precious than all those little Buddhas out there.